Welcome to Monk's Temple. Settle in. Let the noise of the day begin to soften at the edges. I want to talk to you about something that feels like a contradiction, a beautiful puzzle at the heart of the human experience. We spend our lives seeking freedom. Freedom to choose, to speak, to be. Yet, the ancient teachings of Buddhism point to a startling truth. The most profound freedom you will ever find comes not from expressing every impulse, but from mastering the source of those impulses themselves, your own mind. This isn't about restriction. It's about liberation. It's about moving from being a passenger, tossed about in a stormy sea of thoughts and emotions, to becoming the calm, skilled captain of your own ship. This is the core wisdom embedded in verses like those found in the Dhammapada, a collection of the Buddha's teachings. One verse paints a vivid picture. It says the untrained mind is elusive, fast-moving, landing wherever it pleases, driven by desire and aversion. Trying to catch it feels like trying to hold on to a sunbeam or pin down a shadow. It's frustrating. It feels impossible. But then the teaching turns. It declares that to train this mind, to discipline it, is of the highest good. Why? Because within that training lies the end of suffering. Within that discipline blooms a happiness that doesn't depend on what's happening outside of you. Our modern culture often misunderstands this. It champions the idea of total mental expression. Speak your truth. Don't hold back. There's a place for authenticity, of course. But think of it this way, if your mind is a radio, constantly picking up signals, some beautiful music, some chaotic static, some angry news reports, the goal isn't to broadcast every single frequency at full volume. That would just be noise, for you and everyone around you. The power, the artistry, lies in learning to tune the dial. To choose which station you give your energy to. To lower the volume on the static. This tuning is mental discipline. It's not censorship, it's curation. Let me share a story from my own early days of trying to understand this. Before I found this path, I worked in a very high-pressure environment. My worth was tied to outcomes, and my mind was my constant, harsh critic. One day, after a project had gone sideways, I was consumed by a loop of anxious, self-blaming thoughts. You failed. They'll see you're a fraud. This proves you're not good enough. I believed these thoughts were true, just facts being reported by my brain. I felt I had to listen to them, to problem solve from that place of panic. It was exhausting. I mentioned this feeling of being mentally hijacked to a teacher. He listened and then asked a simple question. If a person followed you around all day, whispering those exact words into your ear, "You're a failure, you're a fraud," what would you do? I said, I'd get away from them. I'd tell them to stop. He smiled gently. But when the voice is inside your own head, you invite it to sit down for tea. You argue with it, you believe it, you let it decide your mood for the day. You haven't yet learned that you are not the voice. You are the one who hears the voice. And you have the power to stop serving it tea. That was my first real glimpse of the space that discipline creates, the gap between the thought and the thinker. It was the beginning of learning not to broadcast every damaging signal my mind picked up. This is the foundational psychological insight wrapped in Buddhist wisdom: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses them. When you believe you are your anger, you become angry. When you believe you are your anxiety, you become anxious. Mental discipline starts with this radical shift in identity, from being the storm to being the sky that holds the weather. The sky doesn't struggle against the rain, it allows it to pass through. This perspective is your first and most powerful tool. And this is why I invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Think of your subscription as setting that intention for yourself. It's a small, conscious act that says, I am investing in understanding my own sky. I am committing to learning how to tune my inner radio. Every time you see a new video from us, let it be a gentle reminder to return to that awareness, to practice that tuning. So, if this resonates with you, please tap that subscribe button. It supports this channel, yes, but more importantly, it marks a moment of choice for your own inner peace. Now, if disciplining the mind simply meant thinking positive thoughts, it would be easy. We just swap the channel. But the mind's patterns are deep grooves, worn by years of repetition. The Buddha's path is one of practice, not positivity. It's retraining. And the primary gym for this retraining is meditation. But let's demystify that right now. Meditation isn't about stopping thoughts. It's the practice of noticing where your attention has wandered and gently bringing it back. It's doing reps for your awareness muscle. Imagine your attention is a puppy you're trying to train to sit. You give the command, sit, focus on the breath. The puppy sits for a second, then gets distracted by a butterfly, a thought about your to-do list. Your job isn't to get angry at the puppy. Your job is to kindly, patiently, bring it back and say, sit, again. Every time you do this, you are building the neural pathway for focus and calm. You are building the discipline of choice. You start with 5 minutes. The puppy will wander 100 times. That's okay. The practice is the gentle return. That return is the essence of mental discipline. It's saying, I am not compelled to follow that butterfly of thought. I can choose to return to my anchor. This practice has a direct, spillover effect into your life. That critical inner voice shows up. Instead of serving it tea, engaging, believing, spiraling, you notice it. Ah, the critic is here. You acknowledge its presence without following it down its dark hallway. You return to your anchor, maybe your breath, maybe the physical sensations in your feet on the ground. You have just exercised discipline. You have changed your relationship to your own mind. Now, let's explore what happens when we mistake that inner critic, or any compelling thought, for a command. The untrained mind operates on a stimulus-reaction loop. An event happens, a thought arises, and, boom, we react. It feels instantaneous, inevitable. He insulted me, so I must get angry. I made a mistake, so I must feel shame. But Buddhism, through its psychological lens, points to a hidden space in that loop. It's the space between the stimulus and your response. And in that space lies your freedom. Your power. Your discipline is the act of widening that space. Think of your mind as a vast, ancient library. Over the years, it has automatically written and filed away thousands of rulebooks on how to react. Rulebook for when someone disagrees with you. Rulebook for when you feel inadequate. Most of these were written when you were young, by a less wise librarian, and they run on autopilot. When a situation triggers one of these books, the undisciplined mind simply grabs it off the shelf and follows the old instructions to the letter. It shouts, it withdraws, it worries. Mental discipline is the process of becoming the head librarian. You hear the automatic system whirring, you see the familiar old book being pulled down, and you pause. You ask, is this the best resource for this moment? Can I write a new, wiser page? That pause is everything. It is the birth of conscious choice. Let me illustrate with a story, not from a monastery, but from a modern office. Clara was a project manager, brilliant but known for her volcanic temper. A missed deadline from a teammate would trigger an immediate, sharp email, the rulebook for incompetence, flying off the shelf. It got results out of fear, but it left a trail of resentment and isolated her. She knew it was a problem, but it felt unstoppable, like a sneeze. Her journey into discipline began with a simple, post-it note on her monitor. It read, pause. Where is the feeling in my body? The next time a triggering email arrived, she felt the familiar heat rise. She saw the post-it. Instead of typing, she sat back for 10 seconds. She scanned her body. She found the anger as a tight band across her chest and a clenching in her jaw. She just observed it. She didn't try to make it go away. By doing this, she created a 2-inch gap in the reaction loop. In that gap, a sliver of awareness appeared. This tightness is my anger. I am not my anger. I am the one feeling it. That gap widened just enough for a different choice to emerge. She closed the email, stood up, and walked to the water cooler. By the time she returned, the volcanic urge had subsided to a simmer. She then wrote a firm but constructive email focused on solutions, not blame. The result was better, and more importantly, she didn't carry the toxic aftermath of her own outburst for the rest of the day. Her discipline wasn't in suppressing anger, but in meeting it with mindful curiosity, which disarmed its automatic power. She began rewriting her rulebook, one paused response at a time. This is a perfect entry into a core Buddhist principle, right effort. Discipline isn't about grim, white-knuckled suppression. That's just another kind of struggle, another war in the mind. Right effort is skillful. It has 4 parts, like a gardener tending a plot. 1. Preventing unskillful states, like anger or greed, from arising if you can. This is like pulling weeds early. 2. Letting go of unskillful states that have arisen. This is noticing the weed and gently removing it. 3. Cultivating skillful states, like kindness, calm, concentration. This is planting and watering flowers. 4. Maintaining skillful states that have arisen. This is protecting the flowers. Clara's pause was right effort. She prevented the full-blown outburst. 1. She let go of the immediate reactive thought. 2. Which created space to cultivate a more balanced response. 3. The modern equivalent of these unskillful states is often our addictive relationship to distraction and stimulation. Our phones, our endless scrolling, our need for constant noise, these are pacifiers for the untrained mind. They are ways to avoid the mild discomfort of being alone with our own thoughts. Every time you feel a twinge of boredom and instantly reach for your phone, you are following an old rulebook. You are letting the mind dictate the action to avoid a feeling. Discipline here might look like, when the urge to scroll arises, you pause. You feel the boredom, the restlessness, in your body. You let it be there for 30 seconds. You don't feed it. You just watch it. In doing so, you weaken its compulsive power. You are the librarian choosing not to pull down the distraction manual. This is micro-training for the mind. Another powerful metaphor for the mind is that of a snow globe. When you're agitated, stressed, or caught in strong emotion, it's as if the snow globe has been shaken violently. Everything is a blurry, chaotic storm. You can't see clearly. The undisciplined reaction is to try and solve problems or make decisions while the globe is still in motion, which leads to more chaos. Mental discipline is the simple, profound act of setting the snow globe down. You stop shaking it. You create a pause. Through a breath, through walking away, through focusing on your senses. You let the flakes settle. As they settle, clarity returns. You can see the scene inside the globe perfectly. The answers, or the next right step, often become obvious once the agitation settles. The problem wasn't the scene, it was the shaken-up state you were viewing it from. Your discipline is in remembering to set the globe down. This leads us to the importance of the environment for the librarian, the soil for the gardener, the table for the snow globe. Your outer life profoundly affects your inner capacity for discipline. This is the Buddhist principle of sila, or ethical conduct. It's not about moralistic rules from on high. It's cause and effect. If your actions throughout the day are ones of harm, deceit, or heedless speech, you are constantly shaking your own snow globe. You're filling your mental library with new, chaotic rulebooks of guilt, defensiveness, and regret. Trying to sit and meditate in that aftermath is incredibly difficult. Ethical discipline, being truthful, acting with kindness, using speech wisely, creates a foundation of inner quiet. It removes major sources of inner turbulence. It's like cleaning and organizing the library so the librarian can work effectively. You're not doing it for a cosmic scorecard. You're doing it to create the internal conditions where peace and focus can grow. Let's now turn to one of the most beautiful and practical forms of mental training in the Buddhist toolkit, loving-kindness meditation, or metta. Often, we think of discipline as a stern, corrective force, the inner drill sergeant. But what if one of the most powerful ways to discipline a chaotic mind is with relentless, systematic friendliness? This is the genius of metta. It directly targets the mind's habitual patterns of ill will, separation, and self-criticism by building a counter-habit of warmth and connection. It's less about controlling specific thoughts and more about changing the very climate of your inner world. Think of your mind as a garden. The undisciplined mind is overrun with weeds of judgment, criticism of others, harshness toward yourself, resentment over past events. You can spend all day plucking these weeds, trying to stop negative thoughts, but they grow back from deep roots. Metta is the process of changing the soil itself. You are no longer just a weeder, you become a cultivator of a different crop. You deliberately plant and nurture seeds of goodwill. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. You tend these seeds by repeating these phrases, feeling their intention. As these plants grow, they naturally crowd out the weeds. They change the ecosystem. The discipline here is in the consistent, sometimes initially awkward, cultivation of a feeling that may not arise naturally at first. You are choosing the climate. This practice follows a deliberate sequence for a profound psychological reason. You start with yourself. Not because Buddhism promotes selfishness, but because you cannot genuinely pour from an empty cup. If there is a hidden reservoir of self-loathing or neglect inside, any kindness you try to extend to others will be laced with exhaustion or resentment. So you begin by offering these wishes of wellness to yourself. For many, this is the hardest part. The mind might rebel, I don't deserve this, or "this feels stupid." That's just an old, weedy pattern protesting. The discipline is to gently continue anyway, like patiently watering a parched patch of earth. Then, you extend these wishes to a benefactor, someone who has been kind to you, easily bringing a feeling of gratitude. Then to a neutral person, someone you see but have no strong feelings about, like a barista or a neighbor. This stretches the muscle of unconditional goodwill. Then, the real test, you extend these wishes to a difficult person. This is not about approving of their actions or inviting them back into your life. It is a radical act of psychological freedom. You are saying, "For my own peace, I will not let my heart be a prison of hatred for you. I wish for you to be free from the suffering that likely causes your harmful behavior." You are releasing the hot coal you've been carrying to burn them. Finally, you radiate these wishes outward to all beings, everywhere. The practice systematically breaks down the mind's habit of creating us and them, friend and enemy, which is a major source of inner and outer conflict. And story. David was a man who held a deep, cold grudge against a former business partner who had, in his view, betrayed him. The thought of this man was a constant, bitter knot in his stomach. It poisoned his mood and his new ventures. He tried metta but kept getting stuck at the difficult person stage. He couldn't even say the words without his jaw clenching. His teacher suggested a subtle but powerful shift in discipline: don't start with the man. Start with the knot. Direct the metta phrases to the physical sensation of the resentment in your own body. So David sat, and instead of picturing his partner's face, he located the feeling, a hard, cold ball in his gut. He directed the phrases there: "May this tension be safe. May it be released. May it find ease." He was showing kindness to his own suffering, which was the true problem. After weeks of this, something remarkable happened. The knot began to soften. One day, when he finally brought his partner to mind, he didn't feel the old surge of rage. He felt a pang of sadness. And with that, he could whisper, "May you find peace." The discipline of directing kindness inward first had dissolved the walls of his own inner prison. He hadn't changed the past, he had changed his relationship to it. This practice demonstrates that discipline can be soft. It can be a compassionate redirecting of energy. It's not a battle against bad thoughts. It's a nurturing of a different, more wholesome mental landscape that makes those thoughts less likely to take root. Now, let's integrate this with daily life through another core concept: mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness is the heart of moment-to-moment discipline. It is the continuous, gentle effort to be present. Not lost in memories of the past, not anxious about the future, but right here. The Buddha taught this as the direct path to purification, to overcoming sorrow and grief, to the end of suffering. Why? Because suffering almost always lives in the past, regret, resentment, or the future, worry, fear. When you are fully anchored in the pure sensory experience of the present moment, suffering has very little to grab onto. But our minds are time-traveling machines by default. The discipline of mindfulness is the practice of noticing you've time-traveled and gently returning to your port in the now. Your anchor can be anything: the breath, the classic, the sensations in your hands, the sounds around you. Every time you return, you are doing a rep of mental discipline. You are training your mind to dwell in reality, not in the painful, self-constructed narratives of past and future. Consider this modern example, the waiting room discipline. You're in a doctor's office, running late. The old, undisciplined pattern is to sit there fuming, mentally rehearsing your complaint, worrying about your schedule, feeling your blood pressure rise. You are entirely in a stressful, fictional future. The mindful discipline. You look around. You truly see the color of the wall. You feel the texture of the chair fabric under your fingers. You listen to the faint hum of the lights. You notice the rise and fall of your own chest. You bring yourself entirely into the sensory reality of the waiting room. The late appointment is still a fact, but the secondary suffering, the storm of stress and anger you were adding on top of it, dissipates. You have just used your environment as a gym for presence. You've disciplined your mind away from its automatic, suffering-generating story and into the neutral, manageable present. This is incredibly powerful, and it's available in every mundane moment. Standing in line, washing dishes, walking to your car. This ties back to our snow globe. Mindfulness is the act of setting it down. The flakes are your thoughts about the past and future. Setting it down means returning to the sensory anchor of now. As the flakes settle, you see the situation with clarity, not through the blizzard of mental commentary. Your response, when you finally see the doctor, will be calmer, clearer, and more effective. The discipline was in the redirection of attention. Let's explore a powerful but often overlooked gateway to mental discipline, our senses. The Buddhist path is deeply embodied, understanding that the mind isn't separate from the body's experiences. Much of our mental chaos begins not as abstract thoughts, but as raw, unprocessed sensory input. The untrained mind is a passive, hungry consumer of sensations, gulping down sights, sounds, tastes, and information, which then instantly become fuel for craving, aversion, and distraction. Mental discipline, therefore, must include learning to guard the sense doors. This isn't about withdrawing from the world or building walls. It's about bringing wise, intentional attention to how you take an experience. Imagine your mind is a pristine, still lake. Every sight, sound, and sensation is a pebble thrown into it. The undisciplined mind is like a lake in a hailstorm, constantly pelted, its surface shattered into 1,000 agitated ripples. You then react to the ripples, believing them to be reality itself. Guarding the sense doors means learning to receive the pebbles with awareness, watching the ripples form and fade without jumping in after them. It means choosing, where possible, not to throw in extra pebbles of your own through mindless consumption. Let's take a modern example, the scrolling discipline. You pick up your phone during a moment of boredom. The undisciplined pattern is to fall into the stream. News, social media, videos, each item a pebble hitting your mental lake. Before you know it, 30 minutes have passed, and your mind is a churning mess of comparison, outrage, envy, or trivial information. The disciplined approach begins before you even unlock the screen. You pause. You ask, what is my intention here? Is it a specific need, checking a message, looking up a recipe, or is it an avoidance of a feeling, boredom, loneliness, anxiety? If it's avoidance, you have a choice. You can choose to put the phone down and feel the boredom in your body for just 60 seconds. You guard that sense door. You don't feed the habit. If you do pick it up with intention, you set a boundary. I will check the weather and my messages, then put it down. You engage consciously, not compulsively. This simple act is a profound discipline of your attention. You are training your mind not to be a slave to the next dopamine hit, but to be the curator of its own sensory experience. This principle applies to all senses. Mindless eating while watching TV, consuming taste and sight without awareness, filling every silent moment with podcasts or music, avoiding the sense of hearing stillness, even rushing through a beautiful park without truly seeing the trees, ignoring the sight door. Each is a missed opportunity for discipline. The practice is to do one thing at a time, with full sensory attention. When you eat, just eat. Taste the food. Feel its texture. This isn't just mindfulness, it's a rigorous training in not letting your senses pull your mind into fragmentation. And story, Matteo was a graphic designer who felt constantly overstimulated and mentally fatigued. His work required him to be visually bombarded by screens, and his leisure was more of the same: videos, games, vibrant city life. His mind felt like a browser with 100 tabs open, all playing video. He was advised to practice sense restraint for just 1 hour each evening. For that hour, he would turn off all screens and bright lights. He would sit in a dim room. He might listen to a single piece of instrumental music on low volume, doing nothing else, or simply feel the texture of a smooth stone in his hand. At first, it was agonizing. His mind screamed for more stimulation. But he persisted. After several weeks, he noticed something. That 1 hour of sensory simplicity began to feel like a deep, cool drink of water after a day in the desert. The mental tabs started to close. The constant hum of overstimulation quieted. He wasn't just resting, he was actively disciplining his mind's addiction to sensory input by deliberately providing it with less, but richer, data. His creativity at work actually improved because his mind had space to make original connections, rather than just reacting to the latest visual trend. He learned that guarding the sense doors wasn't deprivation. It was creating the internal silence necessary for clarity and peace to speak. This practice connects directly to the Buddha's teaching on the 6 sense bases: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, and their corresponding objects. Suffering arises not from the senses themselves, but from our unrestrained, unwise engagement with them, from craving pleasant sensations and resisting unpleasant ones. Discipline is the moment you see a beautiful advertisement and feel the pull of wanting, but you note, there is a feeling of desire arising based on a sight, and you choose not to click buy now. You have interrupted the chain at the sense door. You've guarded it. Now, let's link this to another core concept: mindfulness of the body. This is a formal meditation practice and a life practice. It involves systematically sweeping your attention through the body, part by part, feeling sensations without judgment. Why is this so disciplining? Because it anchors the wildly conceptual mind in the non-conceptual, present-moment reality of physical sensation. When you're lost in anxiety about a future meeting, those thoughts are abstract. But the tension in your shoulders is real and happening now. Bringing your attention to the shoulders pulls you out of the mental story and into the manageable present. The body is always in the present tense. By training yourself to return to it, you are training your mind to inhabit reality, not imagination. A final story for this part: Anya was a therapist who absorbed the emotional energy of her clients. By the end of the day, she felt heavy, burdened, and struggled to be present for her own family. Her discipline came through a body-based practice. Between client sessions, she instituted a 2-minute reset. She would stand, feel her feet firmly on the floor, and take 3 very slow, deep breaths, directing her attention to the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out. Then, she would gently shake out her hands and arms, as if physically releasing the energy of the previous session. This wasn't just a stress reliever, it was a rigorous retraining. She was using the doorway of bodily sensation, feet on floor, breath, movement, to deliberately close the mental and emotional, sense door from the previous hour and re-establish her own inner equilibrium. She was guarding her mind by first tending to her body. It allowed her to be compassionately present with each client without carrying the last one's burden into the next room. The discipline of the senses and the body is foundational. It grounds the lofty work of watching thoughts in the tangible, present moment reality. It teaches the mind that peace isn't found in consuming more, but in digesting fully what is already here, with attentive care. Let's delve now into a form of mental discipline that addresses the very architecture of our suffering, our relationship with desire and aversion. The Buddha identified this as the core of the problem, the pulling toward what we want and the pushing away of what we don't want. The undisciplined mind is perpetually caught in this push-pull dynamic. It's like being on a mental treadmill, constantly moving but never arriving at a place of rest. Mental discipline here involves developing a new kind of relationship with these forces, not by brute force suppression, but through the insightful understanding of craving and the cultivation of contentment. Think of your mind as a mouth. An undisciplined mind is a mouth that is always either chewing, tasting, or hungrily looking for the next thing to consume. It's never empty, never at rest. It confuses the act of consuming with the experience of being alive. The feeling of desire is the mouth watering. The feeling of aversion is the mouth puckering in distaste. Discipline is the practice of learning to let the mouth simply be. To feel the saliva come and go without immediately needing to put food in. To notice the distaste without having to spit something out. You are training to observe the craving without being compelled to act on it. This space between the craving and the action is where your freedom grows. This is not passive resignation. It is active disidentification. You learn to see, there is craving, rather than, I must have that. You see, there is aversion, rather than, this must go away. This is where meditation provides the training ground. You sit, and an itch arises on your nose. The craving is for the pleasant sensation of scratching it. The disciplined response. You simply observe the sensation of itching. You notice its exact location, its intensity, its changing nature. You watch the mind's plea to scratch. You hold still. Very often, if you don't feed it with action, the itch subsides on its own, transforming into a neutral sensation. You have just done a micro-experiment in not being ruled by a minor craving. You have strengthened the muscle of patience and observation. This scales up to the larger cravings and aversions in life. Let's explore this within story. Raj was a successful salesman, driven by a deep craving for recognition and status. His happiness was a moving target, next quarter's numbers, the next promotion, the next bigger car. When he achieved a goal, a brief high was quickly replaced by a hollow feeling and a new craving. When he failed, the aversion was intense, a crushing sense of inadequacy. He was on the treadmill, exhausted. His turning point came during a silent meditation retreat, where all external targets were removed. On the third day, bored and agitated, a powerful craving arose for a specific coffee from his favorite shop downtown. It wasn't just a want, it was a compelling, almost physical pull. Following his instructions, he didn't try to push the thought away. Instead, he investigated it. He asked, "What does this craving feel like in the body?" He found a tight, restless energy in his chest and gut. He stayed with that sensation, curious. What is it promising? It promised comfort, warmth, a sense of being a certain kind of person in a certain kind of place. He saw the mental movie of himself holding the cup, feeling sophisticated and satisfied. He watched the movie play, and then he noticed the feeling in his body again. The tightness was still there, unchanged by the fantasy. The craving was just a sensation plus a story. There was no actual coffee, no actual satisfaction in that moment, just the mental agitation of wanting. By observing it with this dispassionate curiosity, its compelling power began to dissolve. It became just another passing weather pattern in his sky. He applied this same investigation to his craving for recognition. When the urge to prove himself arose in a meeting, he'd feel the familiar tightness. Silently, he'd note, craving for validation is here. This simple acknowledgement created a tiny gap. In that gap, he sometimes found he could choose to speak to contribute, not to impress. The quality of his work and his relationships began to change. He was no longer feeding the hungry mouth of his ego with every action. He found a new sense of ease, a contentment not based on the next achievement, but on the freedom from the relentless chase. The discipline was in the pause and the investigative turn toward the craving itself, rather than toward its object. This leads us to the companion of this practice, cultivating contentment, santuthi. Contentment is not passive satisfaction with your lot, it is the active, disciplined practice of appreciating sufficiency. It is the decision to find adequacy in the present moment, independent of gaining or losing. The Buddha praised contentment as the greatest wealth. How do you practice it? By consciously countering the mind's default mode of lack. You perform intentional acts of enough. For example, you finish a meal and the mind whispers, "I want something sweet." Contentment practice might be to pause, feel the pleasant sensation of fullness, and mentally affirm, "This is enough. My body is nourished." You see someone with a newer car, and the mind compares. Contentment practice is to feel the steering wheel of your own car, appreciate that it gets you safely from place to place, and think, "This is sufficient." You are not lying to yourself or denying ambition. You are disciplining the mind's habit of dismissing the present in favor of a phantom future pleasure. You are training it to recognize the abundance that is already here. And story about contentment. Clara lived in a small, cluttered apartment. She spent hours on interior design sites, craving a picture-perfect home. She felt constant low-grade dissatisfaction with her space. Her practice began with a single shelf. She decided that for 1 week, this one shelf would be enough. She cleaned it, arranged the few books and objects on it with care, and each day she would take a moment to really look at it and say, "This shelf is complete and beautiful as it is." She practiced feeling satisfaction with that 1 square foot of her world. From that anchored point of practiced contentment, her perception began to shift. She started to see other spots in her apartment not as flaws, but as opportunities for the same careful, appreciative attention. The craving to overhaul everything softened. She began to find a deep, aesthetic joy in arranging what she already had with love and attention. The discipline of finding enough in one small area taught her mind a new pattern, which gradually spread. Her home became a place of peace not because it was featured in a magazine, but because her mind had ceased to reject it. The discipline of working with craving and contentment is about changing the mind's economic system. It moves from an economy based on scarcity and endless acquisition to one based on the richness of present moment awareness. You are not trying to kill desire. That's just another form of violence toward your own experience. You are learning to see its empty nature, to not be tricked by its promises, and to actively nurture the quiet, countervailing force of gratitude for what is already given. This is how you step off the treadmill and find yourself, at last, on solid, peaceful ground. Now, let's turn our attention to a dimension of mental discipline that is both a tool and a destination: concentration. In Pali, this is samadhi. The Buddha's path is often described as a threefold training: in moral discipline, sila; in concentration, samadhi; and in wisdom, panna. Concentration is the pivotal middle step. It's the collected, unified, steady power of a mind that is no longer fragmented. Think of your mind as a beam of light. An undisciplined mind is a scattered, diffused light, illuminating a wide area dimly, easily swayed by any passing shadow. Concentration is that same beam focused into a laser. Intense, penetrating, able to cut through obscuration and illuminate the deepest truths of experience. Mental discipline cultivates this laser. But concentration isn't about forcing the mind into a rigid lock on one thing. That's just tension. True concentration is a relaxed, sustained, joyful gathering of your mental energy. It's the natural state of a mind that is no longer fighting itself, no longer pulled in 10 directions by craving and aversion. You experience its glimpses when you are, in the flow, utterly absorbed in a creative task, a sport, or a deep conversation. Time falls away. Self-consciousness vanishes. That is a taste of concentrated mind. The discipline lies in learning to cultivate this state at will, not by accident, and to use it not just for playing the piano or coding, but for the ultimate purpose: seeing clearly the nature of reality. How do you build this discipline? Through the formal practice of focused attention meditation. You choose a single object, the breath at the nostrils, a candle flame, a repeated word, mantra. You place your attention there. The mind will wander. Your discipline is the gentle, persistent, kind act of returning. Not with frustration, I failed again, but with the understanding that the return is the rep. Every return is a stitch that mends the fabric of your attention, making it stronger and less prone to unravel. You start with 5 minutes. The laser may only fire for a few seconds at a time. That's fine. You are building the circuitry. And story: Leo was a software engineer whose job demanded deep focus, but he found his mind was a browser with endless pop-up ads. He'd sit down to write code and within minutes be down a rabbit hole of news, messages, or random worries. His attempts at meditation felt the same, frustrating and scattered. He decided to apply an engineering mindset. He called it the one-pointed debugging session. For 10 minutes a day, his sole task was to debug his attention on the breath. He visualized his focus as a cursor on a single line of code, the sensation of the in-breath. When the cursor jumped to a new window, a thought about work, he wouldn't berate himself. He'd simply note, bug, context switch, and execute the command to return the cursor to the original line. He logged his context switches mentally, not with judgment but with data-driven curiosity. Over weeks, the number of switches decreased. More importantly, he began to feel a new quality in his mind, a coherence, a stability. He could boot up this focused state when he sat down to work. The discipline of formal meditation had directly trained his capacity for professional and personal concentration. He learned that a focused mind isn't a gift, it's a built skill. This cultivated concentration is what allows for deeper insight. A scattered mind can't investigate itself. It's like trying to study the details of a snowflake during a blizzard. You need the calm, focused mind, the settled snow globe, to see the intricate patterns of your own experience. This leads to the wisdom part of the training. But concentration also has an immediate, practical benefit: it becomes a refuge. When the world is chaotic, when emotions are high, you can access this inner collectedness. You can take 3 conscious breaths, gathering your scattered energy back to a single point. This isn't running away, it's centering yourself so you can engage from a place of strength, not reactivity. It's the mental equivalent of dropping into a solid athletic stance before the play begins. Now, let's connect this to a related and essential discipline: guarding the mind. This is the proactive aspect. It's not just about returning from distraction, it's about noticing what leads to distraction and creating conditions to avoid it. The Buddha compared it to a fortress. You don't just defend the gates when the enemy is storming them, you post guards to see the enemy coming from afar. What are the enemies of concentration? Certain types of entertainment, certain conversations, certain environments, certain times of day when your willpower is low. Guarding the mind means making wise choices about what you expose your mind to. It means choosing to read a book instead of scrolling before bed because you know one scatters your mind and the other gently focuses it. It means leaving a gossipy conversation because you know it plants seeds of agitation. It's the discipline of being a good steward of your own mental environment. A story about guarding: Maya, a writer, found her most creative and peaceful time was the first 2 hours of the morning. But she had a habit of checking her phone immediately upon waking. This single act would inject the agendas, demands, and dramas of the outside world into her pristine mental space, shattering her focus for hours. Her discipline was drastic but simple. She bought an old-fashioned alarm clock and banished her phone from the bedroom. The first 90 minutes of her day were for a short meditation, a gentle walk, and writing: no screens, no input. She was guarding the dawn of her own mind. She posted a guard at the most vulnerable time. The result was not just more productive writing, but a sustained, calm clarity that infused her entire day. She learned that discipline isn't always about battling distractions in the moment. It's often about strategically arranging your life so you encounter fewer battles to begin with. The twin disciplines of building concentration and guarding the mind work together. One is an internal training, strengthening the mind's muscle. The other is an external wisdom, managing the mind's diet. Together, they create the stable, clear, and powerful instrument of attention necessary for the final and greatest discipline, the cultivation of liberating wisdom. We arrive now at the fruit of the disciplined mind, wisdom. In the Buddhist framework, wisdom, panna, is not the accumulation of information or philosophical knowledge. It is the direct, experiential insight into the true nature of reality. It's what happens when a calm, concentrated, an ethically grounded mind turns its laser-like attention inward to investigate its own fabric. The ultimate purpose of disciplining the mind. Through meditation, sense restraint, working with craving, and building concentration, is to create the conditions for this wisdom to arise. It's the final piece of the puzzle, the insight that liberates. This wisdom is often summarized in the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. We've touched on these, but here we see them not as concepts to believe, but as realities to be seen by the disciplined mind. The untrained mind intellectualizes these ideas. It says, yes, everything changes, but then is shocked and saddened when a loved one dies or a job ends. It says, I shouldn't be so attached, but still feels its happiness crushed by loss. The disciplined mind, through sustained observation, sees change happening in real time in every sensation, every thought, every feeling. It sees the subtle stress inherent in clinging to anything that is by nature fleeting. It sees the emptiness of a permanent, solid self at the center of it all. This seeing is transformative. It changes your relationship to life at the deepest level. How does this investigation work? It's a disciplined inquiry. You don't just think about impermanence, you look for it. In meditation, you watch a pleasant feeling arise. You note its presence. You watch it peak. You watch it fade and disappear. You do this with an unpleasant feeling. You see the entire arc. You are collecting direct evidence of the law of change. You do this with thoughts. They appear out of nowhere, they play for a while, they vanish. You begin to see that everything you can observe, all phenomena, shares this characteristic. It's not a theory. It's the most obvious fact in the universe, once you train your mind to see it. This insight, when it moves from the head to the bones, begins to loosen the grip of clinging. Why grasp at a cloud? Why build your identity on a wave? And story, Elara was a scientist, a geologist used to thinking in terms of deep time. She understood impermanence intellectually on a grand scale, mountains rising and eroding, continents shifting. Yet, she was devastated when her long-term research grant was not renewed. She felt it as a personal failure, an injustice, a solid endpoint. Her identity as a successful researcher was shattered. In her despair, she returned to her mindfulness practice with a new intention. To investigate this feeling of solidity, of finality. She sat with the heavy feeling of defeat in her chest. Instead of getting lost in the story, "My career is over," she applied her scientific curiosity to the sensation itself. She observed its weight, its boundaries, its temperature. And she noticed something: it wasn't a solid block. It pulsed. It shifted. Sometimes it was a sharp ache, sometimes a dull throb. Memories and future fears would arise and pass, each momentarily intensifying or softening the core sensation. She saw the feeling of ended career was not one thing, but a cascade of fleeting mental and physical events. In a moment of clarity, she saw the parallel: her grant was like a layer of sedimentary rock. It had formed under certain conditions, and those conditions had changed. The layer was gone, but the underlying process of geological inquiry. Her curiosity, her skills, her love for the work, that was the deeper tectonic plate, still very much present. The solid failure had dissolved into a process of change. This didn't magically bring the grant back, but it removed the added layer of identity-shattering suffering. She could now respond from wisdom. This condition has changed. What is the next intelligent action? She began writing a book based on her research, something she'd never had time for. The ending became a new beginning, not because of positive thinking, but because her disciplined mind had seen through the illusion of permanence that was causing her pain. This is wisdom in action. It's the application of insight to dissolve suffering. The second mark, dukkha, is seen not as a condemnation of life, but as a diagnostic fact. Suffering arises when we crave for impermanent things to be permanent, when we resist the natural flow of life. A disciplined mind sees this chain of causation in real time. You feel a craving for praise, you notice the tension in that craving, you see the suffering inherent in the state of wanting. This seeing weakens the chain. The third mark, anatta, non-self, is perhaps the most profound insight. The disciplined mind, through deep investigation, cannot find a permanent, independent controller inside. It finds thoughts without a thinker, sensations without a solid feeler, decisions arising from a cascade of prior causes. It sees the self as a verb, not a noun, a process of continuous becoming. This is not a scary emptiness, it is a liberating openness. It means you are not stuck with the personality you constructed yesterday. You are free to respond freshly in each moment. It means the weight of being a solid, fragile me that must be protected and promoted at all costs simply vanishes. What remains is awareness itself, vast and impersonally compassionate. A final teaching story. An old monk was known for his unshakable peace. A young, agitated student pressed him, "What is the secret? What do you actually do all day?" The monk replied, "I walk, I stand, I sit, I lie down." The student, frustrated, said, "But master, everyone does that." The monk smiled. "When I walk, I know I am walking. When I stand, I know I am standing. When thoughts of the past arise, I know they are thoughts of the past, and I am not there. When fears of the future arise, I know they are fears of the future, and I am not there. I am here. And because I am only here, I am free." This is the essence of the disciplined mind informed by wisdom. It is fully present, knowing what is happening as it is happening, free from the hallucinations of time and self. The disciplined mind, therefore, is not an end in itself. It is the necessary vehicle for this journey of insight. You train the mind to be still and clear so that it can reflect reality accurately, like a still pond reflects the moon. When the water is churned by the winds of craving and aversion, the reflection is distorted. Your discipline calms the water. And in that calm clarity, you see everything, the moon, the stars, the vast, open sky of your true nature. This is the ultimate happiness the Buddha pointed to. It's not an emotion that comes and goes. It is the peace of being in alignment with things as they truly are. We have traveled through the landscape of the mind, from recognizing its wild nature, to the practices of pausing, cultivating kindness, guarding our senses, working with craving, building concentration, and arriving at the dawn of wisdom. This is the path of discipline the Buddha illuminated. It is not a straight line, but a spiral. You will circle back to these lessons again and again, each time with a little more understanding, a little more ease. Remember, The goal is not to create a mind that is permanently silent or perfectly obedient. That is not possible, nor is it the point. The goal is to cultivate a relationship of wisdom and compassion with the mind you have. To move from being at war with your thoughts to being a compassionate witness. To shift from reacting to responding. This is the freedom that discipline grants. Think of this entire journey as learning to sail. Your mind is the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, always changing. Your thoughts and emotions are the wind and waves. An untrained sailor is terrified, fighting every wave, exhausted, seasick, at the mercy of the elements. Mental discipline is the skill of sailing. It's learning to set the sails, your attention, to adjust the rudder, your intention, to read the weather, your inner states. You don't control the sea, but you learn to navigate it with grace. You can even find beauty in the storm, because you are no longer afraid of drowning. You are sailing. So, what now? You take one thing. Just one. Perhaps it is the 5-minute daily meditation to train attention. Perhaps it is the pause before reacting to a provoking message. Perhaps it is the practice of finding enough in one small thing each day. You choose one anchor point, one practice, and you commit to it with gentle consistency. That is how the discipline grows. Not through grand, sweeping changes, but through the quiet, daily return to intention. The verses of the Dhammapada that we began with end with a powerful assurance. The mind is hard to control, swift, landing where it wishes. A tamed mind brings happiness. This happiness is your birthright. It is not waiting for you in a future achievement or a perfect circumstance. It is waiting to be uncovered right here, beneath the surface noise of the untrained mind, through the simple, profound act of paying attention, on purpose, with kindness. Your practice begins now. Not tomorrow, not when life gets less busy. Now. In this very moment as you hear these words. Can you feel the contact of your body with the chair? Can you notice the next breath as it enters and leaves? That noticing is the seed of everything we've discussed. That is the disciplined mind, waking up. Thank you for allowing me to share this path with you. May the peace and clarity you cultivate within ripple out, touching every part of your life. May you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be free. This is Monk's Temple. Until we meet again, on the path.